The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of dust and horse sweat, and Dr. Alara Quinn stepped down into hell. Not the biblical kind, though the preacher 3 towns back had assured her that's exactly where women like her belonged. No, this was the earthly version, a collection of weathered buildings squatting in the shadow of mountains that looked like God had given up halfway through making them. The wind screamed across the open plain, carrying the smell of livestock, wood smoke, and something else she couldn't quite name. Desperation, maybe. Ashford Bend. Population. Not enough to matter. Alara adjusted her leather medical bag and surveyed the town with the clinical detachment she'd learned to wear like armor. The main street, if you could call it that, was churned mud frozen into ruts. Buildings leaned against each other like drunks. A general store, a blacksmith, a saloon with doors that hung crooked, and at the far end, what looked like it might have been a church once, before someone had converted it into a grain storage. "This the place?" the driver called down, his tone suggesting he hoped she'd say no. "This is it." He didn't offer to help with her trunk, just dropped it in the mud with a thud that made several men turn and stare. Alara didn't flinch. She'd grown used to stares. What she hadn't grown used to, would never grow used to, was the particular quality of shints that followed them, the kind that felt like a noose tightening. She paid the driver, watched him turn the coach around with unseemly haste, and faced the town alone. The wind bit through her wool coat. February in the territories didn't give a damn about anyone's comfort. Alara picked up her trunk, heavier than it looked, packed with surgical instruments and medical techs that had cost her everything, and started walking toward the general store. Each step made a sucking sound in the half-frozen mud. "Well, I'll be damned." The voice came from the saloon. An old man with a beard like steel wool leaned against the doorframe, squinting at her with watery eyes. McGraw said he was sending a doctor. Didn't say nothing about sending a girl. "I'm 28, Alara said without stopping. "Hardly a girl." "You're hardly a doctor either, I'd wager." She didn't dignify that with a response. The general store's door was stuck, warped by moisture and time, and she had to shoulder it open. Inside, the proprietor looked up from his ledger with the expression of a man who'd just found a wolf in his henhouse. "Help you?" He was thin everywhere except his middle, with a mustache that drooped past his chin. "I'm Dr. Quinn. I believe Mr. McGraw arranged—" "McGraw's dead." The words hit like a slap. Alara set down her trunk carefully, buying herself time. "When?" 3 weeks back. Pneumonia took him in 2 days. The proprietor's eyes were hard little stones. "Guess nobody thought to wire you." "I see." Her voice came out steady, professional. Inside, something cracked. McGraw had been the territorial physician, the one who'd offered her this position when every hospital and practice in Boston had turned her away, the one who'd believed that competence mattered more than anatomy. "Suppose you'll be heading back, then?" The proprietor didn't quite smile. "Nothing for you here." "On the contrary." Alara opened her bag and withdrew a folded letter. "Mr. McGraw and I had a contract. His death doesn't void the Territorial Health Commission's need for a physician in this district. I'll be staying." "In what capacity?" "The only one I'm qualified for. I'm a doctor." "You're a woman." "I'm both. Remarkably, it's possible." The proprietor's face darkened. "Listen here, miss." The door banged open so hard it cracked against the wall. A man filled the frame, breathing like he'd run a mile. He was big, the kind of big that came from hard work, not fat, with shoulders that barely fit through doorways and hands that looked like they could snap fence posts. Mud covered his boots to the knees. Blood spattered his shirt. "Where's McGraw?" The words came out ragged. "I need— Jesus Christ, where's the doc?" "Dead," the proprietor said flatly. "Told you last week, Rourke." "Then get someone. Anyone. My boys—" The man, Rourke, noticed Alara for the first time. His eyes swept over her, dismissed her, went back to the proprietor. "Send someone to Fort Collins. Telegraph. I'll pay whatever—" "Fort Collins is 4 days away," Alara said quietly. "If your son's injured, he doesn't have 4 days." Rourke turned to her slowly, as if she were a dog that had suddenly spoken. "Who the hell are you?" Dr. Elara Quinn. She met his eyes without flinching. They were the color of thunderclouds, bloodshot with exhaustion or fear or both. I'm McGraw's replacement. Tell me what happened. His replacement. Rourke barked a laugh with no humor in it. His replacement is a physician with 8 years of surgical training at Boston General Hospital, Elara cut in. Your son is injured. Are you going to waste time questioning my qualifications, or are you going to let me help him? For a moment, the only sound was the wind rattling the windows. Rourke stared at her with something between disbelief and raw desperation. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd thought, maybe 35, 40 at most. But life out here had carved lines around his eyes and mouth that made him look ancient. He's not injured. The words came out strangled. He's sick. Been sick for days, getting worse. This morning he started screaming and nothing helps. Nothing makes it stop. Describe the symptoms. Jesus, lady, I don't have time for... Describe the symptoms. Lara's voice could have cut glass. Unless you'd prefer I let your son keep screaming while you explain to me why my help isn't good enough. Something in Rourke's face crumpled. Just for a second, the hardness cracked, and she saw the terror underneath. Fever. High. He can't keep food down, vomiting everything, even water, and the pain right here. He pressed a hand to his lower right abdomen. Started in the middle, then moved. Now he just screams when I touch it. Elara's blood went cold. How old is he? 12. How long since the pain moved to the right side? I don't know. Hours? Maybe 6? 7? We need to go now. Elara grabbed her bag and pushed past him into the street. Behind her, she heard Rourke's boots on the floorboards. Wait, what's wrong with him? Appendicitis, probably ruptured by now. She didn't slow down. Where's your horse? What are you... Mr. Rourke! Elara spun to face him. Your son has an inflamed appendix that's likely burst. Poison is spreading through his abdomen. Without surgery, he'll be dead by morning. With surgery... She paused. With surgery, he has a chance. But we don't have time for you to decide whether I'm woman enough to save his life. Either take me to him or bury him. Choose. The color drained from Rourke's face. For a horrible moment, Elara thought he might actually choose his pride over his son's life. It happened. She'd seen it happen. Men who'd rather watch their families die than accept help from someone they considered beneath them. Then Rourke moved. 2 strides and he was past her, grabbing a horse hitched outside the saloon. It was a huge animal, some kind of draft crossbreed, and he swung into the saddle with the easy grace of someone who'd been riding since before he could walk. Get up. He offered a hand. Elara took it. His grip was like iron as he hauled her up behind him. She barely had time to secure her bag before he kicked the horse into a gallop that nearly threw her off. She grabbed his coat, holding on as the town blurred past, and they hit open country. The land was beautiful in a hostile way. Endless plains broken by rocky outcrops, mountains looming in the distance like judges. The sky was that particular blue that meant snow was coming. Elara's medical bag bounced against her hip. She'd operated in worse conditions than this. She'd performed an emergency tracheotomy in the back of a moving ambulance during the Panic of '93. She'd extracted a bullet from a police officer's spine on a kitchen table while his wife held the lamp steady and his children watched through the doorway. But never like this. Never this far from help. Never with so much depending on hands that might not be steady, tools that might not be clean, a patient who might already be beyond saving. The Rourke Ranch appeared over a rise, a sprawling collection of buildings that looked more functional than comfortable. Barn, stables, a bunkhouse for hands, and a main house that was bigger than Elara had expected. Smoke poured from the chimney. As they approached, she could hear it, screaming. Rourke dismounted before the horse had fully stopped and ran for the house. Elara slid down less gracefully, her legs cramping from the ride, and followed. The front door was already open. Inside, organized chaos. A woman stood over a bed in what looked like the main room, holding a cloth to a boy's forehead. She was somewhere past 50, gray-haired and sturdy, with the kind of competent hands Elara had learned to recognize. A ranch wife, probably. Used to dealing with injuries, illnesses, the daily catastrophes of frontier life. The boy in the bed was the color of old paper. Sweat plastered his dark hair to his skull. His eyes were squeezed shut, mouth open in another scream that seemed to go on forever. Out! Alara's voice cut through the noise. Everyone except the father. Out! Now! The woman, Rourke's wife, sister, looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Who in the hell do you think? I'm a doctor. That boy is dying. You have 5 seconds to decide if you want to help me save him or watch me work around you while he screams. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Rourke said quietly, Martha, please. Martha's jaw worked, but she stepped back. I'll boil water. Lots of it, clean cloths, whiskey if you have it, laudanum. And I need a table, a clean table, scrubbed with lye soap. Alara was already moving to the bed, setting her bag down, pulling out her stethoscope. The boy, what was his name? Did it matter? Screamed again when she touched his abdomen. Even through the blankets, she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. What's his name? She asked Rourke. Thomas. Tommy. Rourke's voice was barely a whisper. Tommy. Alara leaned close to the boy's ear. Tommy, I'm Dr. Quinn. I'm going to help you, but I need to touch your stomach, and it's going to hurt. Can you be brave for me? The boy's eyes cracked open. They were the same color as his father's, storm gray, and filled with animal terror. Make it stop, he sobbed. Please make it stop. I will, I promise, but first I need to examine you. She pulled back the blankets slowly. Tommy was thin, all angles and growing boy awkwardness, wearing a nightshirt soaked with sweat. Alara pressed gently on his abdomen, watching his face. When she reached the right lower quadrant, he screamed so loud she felt it in her bones. Rebound tenderness, bored rigid abdomen, fever that had to be pushing 104. Every sign pointed to the same diagnosis. How long has he been like this? Alara asked, still examining. The pain got bad yesterday afternoon. Rourke stood at the foot of the bed, hands gripping the iron footboard hard enough to bend it. But he'd been sick before that. Couple days. We thought it was something he ate. It wasn't. Alara straightened. His appendix ruptured. Probably last night, maybe earlier this morning. The poison from that rupture is spreading through his abdominal cavity. Without surgical intervention, he'll develop peritonitis. Then sepsis. Then... How long? Alara met his eyes. Hours. Maybe less. Jesus. Rourke's face went gray. What do we do? We operate. Remove the appendix, clean out the infected material, pray we caught it in time. Operate. The word came out flat. Here? Unless you have a hospital nearby that I'm unaware of. The closest hospital is Fort Collins, 4 days. Then here. Alara started unpacking her bag. Scalpels, retractors, surgical thread. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory from 1,000 operations. I need clean water, light, someone with steady hands who won't faint at the sight of blood. Can you provide those things? Rourke looked around the room as if it might provide answers. I've never seen surgery. I don't know what... Can you follow instructions? Yes. Can you hold your son down if he struggles? Rourke's throat worked. Yes. Then you'll do. Alara pulled out her chloroform bottle, checked the level. Maybe enough for the initial incision. After that, Tommy would have to endure. Where's that table? Martha appeared in the doorway. Behind her, 2 ranch hands carried a massive wooden table, still dripping from a scrubbing. They set it down in the center of the room, near the fireplace where the light was best. Boil those instruments, Alara said, pointing to the scalpels and retractors laid out on a clean cloth. 3 minutes. Use tongs. Don't touch them with your hands. And bring me the cleanest sheets you have. For the next 20 minutes, Alara transformed the ranch house into something approximating an operating theater. It wasn't Boston General. It wasn't even close. But it would have to do. Tommy screamed when they moved him to the table. The sound echoed off the log walls, primal and horrible. Rourke held him down, his face carved from stone, while Alara checked her instruments one last time. We're ready? She said quietly. Wait. Rourke's voice cracked. What if you can't? Then I can't. But if I don't try, He dies for certain. Alara met his eyes. I've performed this surgery 47 times. 43 of those patients survived. I'm very good at my job, Mr. Rourke, but I'm not a miracle worker. The appendix has already ruptured. There's infection. He's weak. The odds... I don't want to hear about odds. Rourke's hands were shaking now. I want you to save my son. I'm going to try. She turned to Tommy. The boy had stopped screaming, but only because he was too exhausted to continue. His breathing was rapid and shallow. Shock, Alara thought. They were running out of time. Tommy. She took his hand. It was small in hers, burning with fever. I'm going to put you to sleep now. When you wake up, the pain will be better. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? The boy's eyes found hers. For a moment, something flickered there. Hope, maybe. Or just the desperate need to believe someone could make this stop. Okay, he whispered. Alara poured chloroform onto a clean cloth and held it over Tommy's nose and mouth. Breathe deep. Count backward from 10. 10, 9, 8. The boy's voice slurred. 7, 6. His eyes rolled back. His body went limp. He's under. Alara set aside the chloroform and picked up her scalpel. The blade caught the firelight, gleaming. Mr. Rourke, I need you to stand right here. Keep these retractors steady when I tell you. Don't look at what I'm doing. Look at his face. If he starts to wake, you tell me immediately. Understand? Rourke nodded. He looked like he might vomit. Martha, Alara called, I need you to watch his breathing. Count his breaths out loud. If he stops breathing, you shout. The older woman took up position at Tommy's head, her face grim but steady. Alara took one breath. 2. Then she cut. The incision was clean, right lower quadrant, following the path she'd made dozens of times before. Blood welled immediately. She worked quickly, precisely, separating muscle layers, clamping bleeders, working her way down to the peritoneum. Retractor, she said. Rourke fumbled it into place. Steady, don't shake. The peritoneum glistened, angry red. When she opened it, the smell hit her like a wall. Infection. Worse than she'd hoped. Jesus Christ, Rourke breathed. Don't look, Alara snapped. Watch his face. She explored the abdominal cavity with her fingers, gentle despite the urgency hammering in her chest. There, the appendix. Or what was left of it. Ruptured completely, spilling its poison into the peritoneal cavity. Pus everywhere, thick and yellow-green. This was bad. This was very bad. But she'd worked with worse. Breathing's getting shallow, Martha called out. Noted. Alara isolated the appendix, tied off the base with surgical thread, cut. The diseased tissue came away in her hand, dark and necrotic. She dropped it into a basin Martha had set aside. Then the real work began. For the next hour, Alara cleaned. She flushed the abdominal cavity with boiled water, scooped out infected material, checked every inch she could reach for signs of abscess. Her back ached. Her hands cramped. The light from the fireplace flickered, throwing shadows that made the work twice as hard. Tommy stirred once. Alara held the chloroform cloth over his face again, counting the seconds, praying she wasn't giving him too much. Too little, and he'd wake screaming. Too much, and he'd stop breathing. How much longer? Rourke's voice was tight. As long as it takes. Alara found another pocket of pus, drained it, irrigated. We can't close until I'm sure it's clean. If we seal infection inside, he dies anyway. Finally, she was satisfied. The peritoneal cavity was as clean as she could make it without modern antibiotics. She'd done everything she could. I'm closing, she announced. The next part went faster. Layer by layer, she rebuilt what she'd taken apart. Peritoneum, muscle, fascia, skin. Each suture placed with care, each knot tied with fingers that had gone numb with cold and exhaustion. When she tied off the final stitch, the room was dark except for the fire. Someone had lit lamps without her noticing. Tommy lay still on the table, breathing shallow but regular. Alara stepped back. Her surgical gown, one of her own clean shirts, ruined now, was soaked with blood and worse things. Her hands were shaking. Is he... Rourke couldn't finish the question. The surgery went as well as it could. Alara stripped off her gloves, dropped them in the basin. The appendix is out. The infection is cleaned, but he's weak, and there was a lot of contamination. The next 48 hours will tell us if his body can fight off what's left. 48 hours, Rourke repeated numbly. Maybe less, maybe more. Alara washed her hands in clean water, watching the blood swirl away. He needs to be kept warm, comfortable. Small sips of water when he wakes, nothing else for at least 12 hours. I'll stay and monitor him. You'll... Rourke stared at her. You'll stay? Did you think I'd operate and leave? Alara pulled off her ruined shirt, grateful for the clean one underneath. Mr. Rourke, your son just had major abdominal surgery performed on a kitchen table by lamplight. If he develops a fever, if the wound shows signs of infection, if he stops breathing, every one of those things could kill him. So yes, I'll stay. Because unlike whatever you seem to think of me, I actually care whether my patients live or die. For a long moment, Rourke just looked at her. Then slowly, he said, I owe you an apology. You owe me nothing except your cooperation in your son's recovery. Alara started cleaning her instruments, methodical and precise. Martha, can you help me move him back to the bed? Gently. We can't disturb the incision. They transferred Tommy with careful hands. The boy didn't wake, just made a small sound in his throat that might have been pain or might have been nothing. Alara tucked clean blankets around him, checked his pulse, thready but present, and finally allowed herself to sink into a chair. Every muscle in her body screamed. She'd been on her feet for hours, bent over that table, fighting for a child's life. Now the adrenaline was draining away, leaving her hollow. You should eat, Martha said quietly. She'd appeared with a plate of something, stew, maybe, and a cup of coffee, so strong Alara could smell it from across the room. Thank you. Alara took the plate but couldn't muster the energy to lift the spoon. Instead, she just sat there, watching Tommy breathe. Rourke had taken up position on the other side of the bed. He held his son's hand, his face a mask of exhaustion and fear. He looks so small, he said softly. He is small. He's 12. Alara sipped the coffee. It was terrible and wonderful at the same time. Did his mother? Dead. 3 years back. Rourke's voice was flat. Fever took her in a week. Same thing that killed McGraw, probably. Tommy and we've been on our own since. I'm sorry. Are you? Rourke looked at her then, and there was something raw in his eyes. Because you seem like the type who doesn't have time for sorry. Just facts and scalpels and doing what needs doing. Alara set down her cup carefully. Mr. Rourke, I don't know what kind of woman you think I am, but I assure you, I have plenty of time for sorry. I'm sorry your wife died. I'm sorry your son got sick. I'm sorry I can't guarantee he'll live through the night. I'm sorry that the world is unfair and cruel, and that medicine can only do so much. Is that enough sorry for you? Rourke's jaw worked. For a moment she thought he might yell. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a broken sound, but genuine. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. They sat in silence after that. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind had picked up, howling around the corners of the house. Snow was coming. Alara could feel it in the air, that particular pressure that meant a storm was building. Tommy stirred around midnight. His eyes opened, unfocused and confused, and he made a small sound of distress. Hey! Rourke leaned close. Hey, Tommy, you're okay. You're home. Dad? The boy's voice was barely a whisper. Hurts. I know, son, I know, but you're going to be okay. Rourke's voice cracked on the last word. Alara moved to the bedside, checking Tommy's pulse, his temperature, the incision site. Everything looked as good as could be expected. Tommy, can you take a small sip of water for me? She helped him drink from a cup, just a little. He kept it down. Good sign. The pain will get better, she told him gently. You had surgery. Your appendix was making you sick, so I took it out. Now your body needs time to heal. You're the doctor? Tommy's eyes found hers. Even exhausted and in pain, there was something sharp in his gaze. The one Dad didn't want? Thomas, Rourke said sharply. It's all right. Elara smiled slightly. Yes, I'm the doctor your father didn't want, but he let me help you anyway. That took courage. Tommy's eyes drifted to his father, then back to her. Am I going to die? The question hung in the air like a blade. Not if I can help it, Elara said honestly. But you need to fight, Tommy. Your body is working very hard to heal. You need to help it by resting, drinking water when I tell you to, and being patient. Can you do that? I'll try. That's all anyone can ask. As Tommy's eyes closed again. Within minutes, he was asleep. Real sleep this time, not unconsciousness. His breathing was deeper, more regular. Elara allowed herself a small measure of hope. The night stretched on. Elara dozed in the chair, waking every hour to check on Tommy. Each time, he was a little better, breathing easier, color returning to his face. The fever still burned, but not as high. Dawn broke cold and clear. Elara stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and rose. Behind her, she heard Rourke moving. He made it through the night, he said quietly. He did. Elara didn't turn around. But we're not safe yet. The next day or two will be critical. I know. A pause. Dr. Quinn, I need to say something. Then say it. When you first came, when I saw you were a woman, I thought... Rourke's voice was rough. I thought McGraw had sent me some kind of nurse. Or maybe just someone pretending. I didn't believe you could be a real doctor. And even when you told me what was wrong with Tommy, even when you said you could help, part of me wanted to refuse. Wanted to ride to Fort Collins and find a man. Elara turned then. But you didn't. No. Because Tommy didn't have time. And because... He met her eyes. Because something in your face told me you knew exactly what you were doing. You weren't asking permission. You were telling me facts. And I realized I could either trust those facts or watch my son die. What made you choose trust? Rourke was quiet for a long moment. My wife, he said finally. Sarah. She was smart, smarter than me, and people always underestimated her because she was a woman. Made her furious. She used to say, he swallowed hard. She used to say that the world was run by fools who mistook confidence for competence and competence for luck. When I looked at you, I heard her voice, and I thought, what would Sarah do? She would have let me operate. Yeah, a ghost of a smile. She would have, and then she would have torn me a new one for hesitating. Elara smiled despite herself. I think I would have liked your wife. She would have liked you too. The moment stretched between them, something shifting, not quite trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The recognition that maybe, just maybe, they were on the same side. Tommy woke properly around noon. He was still in pain, still weak, but his eyes were clear. He managed a few spoonfuls of broth, kept it down. You're doing very well, Elara told him, checking his incision. Clean, no signs of infection. Better than I dared hope. Does that mean I don't have to stay in bed? Tommy's voice was stronger now. It means you stay in bed for at least another week, possibly 2. 2 weeks? The boy looked horrified. But Dad needs help with the horses and the fences, and your father will manage. Elara fixed him with a stern look. You just had major surgery, Tommy. If you tear those stitches, you could die. Do you understand? Die. So yes, you stay in bed, you rest, you heal. And maybe, if you're very lucky and very good, you'll be back on your feet before spring. Tommy slumped back against the pillows, defeated but alive. The storm hit that evening. Snow came down in sheets driven by wind that screamed like something alive. Elara stood at the window, watching the world disappear into white, and felt the isolation settle around her like a weight. She was stuck here. No way back to town until the storm passed. Days, maybe. You can have the spare room, Martha said, appearing at her elbow. It's not much, but it's warm and the bed's clean. Thank you. Elara meant it. For everything. For helping during the surgery. For not questioning. Martha snorted. Oh, I questioned plenty. In my head. But I figured arguing wouldn't help Tommy, and besides, She fixed Alara with a shrewd look. I've lived out here long enough to know that sometimes the help you need doesn't come in the package you expected. Rourke's a good man, but he's got his mother's pride and his father's stubbornness. Took a lot for him to let you in that door. Is he always this difficult? Only when he's terrified. Martha's expression softened. Tommy's all he has left. When Sarah died, something broke in him. He spent 3 years holding on so tight I'm surprised the boy can breathe. The idea of losing him? She shook her head. You gave him back his son. He won't forget that. That night, Alara lay in the spare room and listened to the storm rage. Her body ached. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying the surgery, looking for mistakes, things she could have done better. But Tommy was alive. Against all odds, against a ruptured appendix and frontier conditions and her own exhaustion, the boy was alive. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was something. In the next room, she could hear Rourke's voice, low and steady, reading to his son. She couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm was soothing, the sound of a father who'd been given back something he thought he'd lost. Alara closed her eyes and let sleep take her. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of wind that sounded like wolves howling, snow that piled against the windows until the world outside disappeared, and ice that turned every surface into a treacherous trap. Alara watched the ranch hands struggle to the barn and back, ropes tied around their waists so they wouldn't lose their way in the whiteout. 40 yards between buildings, and men could freeze to death trying to cross it. She spent those days at Tommy's bedside, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat, every sign that his body was winning the war against infection. The fever broke on the second day. The incision stayed clean. By the third day, he was complaining about being stuck in bed, the surest sign of recovery Alara knew. Can't I at least sit up? Tommy shifted restlessly under the blankets. My back hurts from lying down. Your back hurts because your abdominal muscles are healing. Alara checked his pulse anyway, strong and steady. But yes, you can sit up. You can sit, carefully. If it pulls or hurts, you stop immediately. She helped him arrange the pillows behind his back. The boy moved like an old man, wincing with each adjustment, but his color was good, almost normal. Dr. Quinn? Tommy's voice was hesitant. Can I ask you something? Why'd you become a doctor? I mean, being a lady and all. Seems like it'd be easier to just not. Alara considered the question. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, the fire crackled. My mother died when I was 13, she said finally. Childbirth. The baby, too. My father called the doctor, an old man who'd been practicing since before the war. He took one look at her bleeding and told my father there was nothing to be done, that we should make her comfortable and pray. But there was something to be done? I don't know, maybe not. Alara stared at her hands. But he didn't even try. Didn't examine her properly, didn't attempt to stop the bleeding, just gave up. And I stood there watching my mother die. And I thought, someone should know. Someone should know how to fix this, how to make it stop. Tommy was quiet for a moment. Did you? Learn how to fix it? I learned how to try. That's all medicine is, really, trying. Sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. She met his eyes. But we try. My mom died too, Tommy said softly. 3 years ago. Dad called McGraw, but he was in Fort Collins. By the time he got here, she was already gone. Fever took her fast. I'm sorry. Dad says sorry doesn't bring people back. Your father's right, but it's all we have sometimes. Alara adjusted his blankets. The trying, the sorry. It's what keeps us human. The moment we stop caring whether people live or die, we're lost. The door opened and Rourke came in, stamping snow off his boots. His face was raw from the cold, ice crusted in his beard. Horses are fed, barns holding. Lost 3 fence posts on the north pasture, but we'll fix them when this blows over. How long? Alara asked. Storm. Rourke moved to the fire, holding his hands out to the heat. Could break tonight, could go another day. Hard to say. You worried about getting back to town? I'm worried about other patients who might need help. In this weather, nobody's going anywhere. He glanced at Tommy. How's he doing? Better. Fever's gone. Incision looks clean. He'll make a full recovery if he doesn't do anything stupid. I won't, Tommy protested. You're 12. Stupid is practically required. Rourke's voice was dry, but there was relief underneath it. Deep relief. He moved to the bedside, pressed a hand to his son's forehead, like he couldn't quite believe the fever was really gone. You scared 10 years off my life, you know that? Sorry, Dad. Don't be sorry. Be careful. Rourke's hand lingered a moment, then withdrew. Martha's making supper. You hungry, Doc? Starving, actually. They ate at the big kitchen table. Rourke, Ilara, Martha, and 2 ranch hands who'd come in from the bunkhouse, half frozen and grateful for hot food. The meal was simple but substantial. Venison stew, fresh bread, coffee that could strip paint. The men ate in silence, too tired or too shy to speak much. Martha watched Ilara with sharp eyes. You planning to stay in Ashford Bend after all this? That was the arrangement with McGraw. Ilara sopped up stew with bread. The Territorial Commission needs a physician in this district. I'm it. Where are you going to practice? McGraw had an office above the general store. Had? Ilara caught the past tense. Owner converted it to storage after McGraw died. Said he wasn't going to waste space on a doctor who wasn't coming. Martha's expression was sour. Man's about as welcoming as a rattlesnake. I noticed. Ilara had noticed several things about the town in her brief time there. The distrust, the hostility, the way people had looked at her like she was selling snake oil instead of offering medical care. I'll figure something out. You could set up here. Rourke's voice was casual, but everyone at the table stiffened. The ranch, I mean. We've got space. Old bunkhouse isn't being used. You could convert it. Ilara set down her spoon carefully. That's generous, but I need to be accessible to the whole territory. People won't ride out to a ranch for medical care. They will if they're desperate enough. Rourke met her eyes. And those are the ones who need help most. The ones who can't afford fancy doctors in Fort Collins. The ones who'd rather die than admit they need help at all. He had a point. Ilara had seen it in Boston, too. The poor, the immigrants, the people who slipped through every crack in society. They didn't go to hospitals until they were half dead. By then, it was often too late. I'd need proper facilities, she said slowly. Examination room, storage for medicines, space for patients who need overnight observation. Bunkhouse has 4 rooms. You could use 2 for patients, 1 for storage, 1 for yourself if you need it. Rourke was warming to the idea. There's a well nearby. We could run a stove line for heat. It's not Boston, but nothing out here is Boston. That's rather the point. Ilara considered. A practice on a ranch, accessible to both the town and the outlying homesteads. It could work. It would require trust. People would have to believe she was legitimate, competent. The surgery on Tommy was a start, but one success didn't make a reputation. Still, she'd worked with less. I'd need to see the building, she said, soon as the storm clears. The storm broke that night. Ilara woke to silence, the absence of wind so profound it felt like pressure in her ears. She dressed in the pre-dawn darkness and stepped outside. The world had transformed. Snow lay 3 feet deep in places, sculpted into bizarre shapes by the wind. The sky was that particular clear that came after storms, stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. The cold bit through her coat instantly, stealing her breath. Beautiful and deadly. That was the frontier in a nutshell. The bunkhouse sat 50 yards from the main house, half buried in snow. In daylight, after the ranch hands had cleared a path, Ilara inspected it with a critical eye. 4 rooms, just as Rourke had said. Sturdy construction, good bones, currently filled with broken furniture, old tack, and about a decade's worth of accumulated junk. We'd clear it out, Rourke said, watching her face. Get it cleaned up proper. Put in whatever you need. And I'd need examining tables, cabinets for supplies, a good stove. Medical instruments need to be sterilized, and that requires sustained heat. Glass windows that actually seal, a lock on the door. Ilara turned to him. And I'd need the town to know this is a legitimate practice, not some ranch wife playing nurse. You're worried about your reputation. I'm worried about people dying because they won't trust a woman doctor. Ilara's voice was sharp. I have the training, Mr. Rourke. 8 years at one of the best medical schools in the country. I've performed more surgeries than most frontier doctors will see in a lifetime. But none of that matters if people won't walk through my door. Rourke was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Tommy's alive because of you. Every person in this town knows that. Martha's already been talking. She goes to quilting circles, church socials. Word spreads. Give it time. I've been giving it time for 10 years. Time doesn't change minds. Results do. Then get results. Rourke met her eyes. Set up here. Treat whoever comes. Save lives. Let the work speak. It was, Ilara had to admit, the only real option she had. The general store owner had made it clear she wasn't welcome. The town had no hospital, no clinic, no infrastructure for medical care beyond whatever patent medicines the traveling salesman sold. If she wanted to practice, she'd have to build it herself. She'd done harder things. All right, she said. I'll do it. But I pay rent. This is a business arrangement, not charity. You just saved my son's life. I think we can call it even. No. Ilara's voice was firm. That was medicine. This is business. I won't be beholden to anyone, Mr. Rourke. Not even you. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Fair enough. $20 a month. That's half what it should be. Take it or leave it. Ilara bit back a smile. I'll take it. They shook on it there in the snow, her small hand disappearing into his massive one. A partnership born of necessity and grudging respect. It would have to be enough. The next week passed in a blur of activity. The ranch hands cleared out the bunkhouse, hauling away years of accumulated debris. Rourke rode to Fort Collins and returned with lumber, glass, a cast iron stove that took 4 men to install. Ilara unpacked her medical supplies, organized them with the precision she'd learned in hospital work, and tried not to think about how precarious this all felt. She made one trip back to town during that week. The roads were still treacherous, ice hidden under fresh snow, but Rourke insisted on accompanying her. They rode in silence for the most part, the horses picking their way carefully. You're quiet, Rourke said finally. Thinking. About? Whether this will work, whether people will come. Ilara watched the mountains in the distance. Whether I'm making a mistake. You always this doubtful? I'm this realistic. There's a difference. She glanced at him. In Boston, I had credentials, recommendations, a position at a hospital, even if it was just assisting in surgery. Out here, I have nothing, just my word that I know what I'm doing. You have more than that. You have Tommy, alive, walking around, eating everything in sight. Rourke's voice was dry. That boy's a walking advertisement for your skills. One patient doesn't make a practice. No, but it's a start. They reached town as the sun climbed toward noon. Ashford Bend looked different in daylight, less hostile, just tired. A collection of buildings clinging to existence in a landscape that didn't care whether they lived or died. Ilara stopped at the general store first. The proprietor, his name was Sykes, she'd learned, looked up from his ledger with obvious displeasure. Dr. Quinn, the title came out grudging. Heard you're still around. I am. I'm setting up a practice at the Rourke Ranch. Ilara set a list on the counter. I need these supplies, medical grade if you have them, general grade if you don't. Sykes scanned the list, his eyebrows climbing. Bandages, carbolic acid, surgical thread, morphine. He looked up. You got money for all this? Ilara set down cash. More than the supplies would cost, but she wanted to make a point. Will that cover it? Should. Sykes counted the bills slowly, like he expected them to disappear. Take me a few days to gather everything. Some of this I'll have to order from Fort Collins. That's fine. I'll be back on Friday. She turned to leave, but Sykes's voice stopped her. Heard what you did for the Rourke boy. Heard it was touch and go. Ilara turned back. It was. McGraw couldn't have done it. Too old. Hands shook too bad. Sykes's expression was unreadable. You really trained in Boston? Massachusetts General Hospital. 8 years. Huh. Sykes went back to his ledger. Suppose stranger things have happened. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't outright hostility either. Ilara would take it. The rest of the week brought more small victories. A woman stopped by the ranch, clutching a baby who'd been coughing for days. Alara examined the child, just a cold, but she mixed up a syrup that would help with the cough and showed the mother how to steam the baby's chest with hot water and herbs. "How much?" the woman asked nervously. $2. Alara handed over the bottle. "Bring her back if the cough doesn't improve in 3 days or if she develops a fever. No charge for follow-up visits." The woman paid and left, but not before whispering to Martha in the kitchen. Alara heard snatches of it. "So gentle with her, knew exactly what to do. Not what I expected." Word spread. Slowly, but it spread. A ranch hand came in with a gash on his arm from a barbed wire fence. Alara cleaned it, stitched it up with neat, precise sutures, and sent him away with instructions for keeping it clean. An older man arrived complaining of chest pain. Alara examined him, asked careful questions, and diagnosed angina. She couldn't cure it. There was no cure. But she could prescribe rest, a change in diet, and nitroglycerin for when the pain got bad. The man left looking skeptical, but willing to try. Each patient was a test. Each success built something fragile and essential: credibility. Tommy recovered with the resilience of youth. 2 weeks after the surgery, he was out of bed. 3 weeks, and he was pestering Alara to let him do light chores. "No," she said firmly, "but I feel fine." "You feel fine because you've been resting. Start pushing it now and you'll tear those stitches. Then we're back where we started, except worse." Alara fixed him with the look that had cowed medical students twice his age. Another week, then light chores. Nothing involving lifting or twisting. Understand? "Yes, ma'am." Tommy slumped in defeat. Rourke, watching from the doorway, smiled slightly. "She's good at that." "At what?" "The voice. The one that says, 'Don't even think about arguing.'" He came into the room. "Sarah had it too. Used to use it on me when I was being stubborn. I imagine she used it often then." "More than I'd like to admit." Rourke's expression softened. "Tommy talks about you. Says you told him about your mother." He asked why I became a doctor. It seemed relevant. It was. He's been thinking about it. About how people die, why they die, whether it matters if someone tries to save them. Rourke paused. He asked me if his mother could have been saved, if someone like you had been here. Alara's chest tightened. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that I don't know, that maybe yes, maybe no, that sometimes people die no matter what we do." Rourke's voice was rough. "But that having someone who knows what they're doing, who actually tries, that matters, even if it doesn't change the outcome." "You're right. It does matter." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of shared loss hanging between them. Then Rourke cleared his throat. "The bunkhouse is ready, stove's working, windows are sealed, furniture's in. You want to see it?" Alara followed him across the yard. The bunkhouse had transformed. Clean floors, whitewashed walls. 2 rooms set up as examination areas, complete with tables, chairs, cabinets for supplies. A 3rd room for patient recovery with 2 beds and clean linens. The 4th for storage and Alara's personal use when needed. It wasn't Boston General, but it was hers. "What do you think?" Rourke asked. "I think it's perfect." Alara ran her hand over one of the examination tables. Sturdy, well-built. "Thank you for this, for taking the risk." "No risk. You proved yourself with Tommy. Still, you're letting me practice on your property. That's an endorsement, whether you mean it to be or not." "I mean it to be." Rourke met her eyes. "This territory needs a doctor. You're it. Simple as that." Simple. If only it were. That night, a rider came pounding into the ranch yard, shouting for help. Alara grabbed her bag and ran outside, Rourke right behind her. The rider was young, maybe 20, and terrified. "It's my wife," he gasped. "The baby's coming, but something's wrong. She's been in labor for hours and she won't stop bleeding, and how far?" Alara was already moving toward the horses. 3 miles? Maybe 4. "Saddle 2 horses," Rourke barked at one of the hands. "Fast." Within minutes, they were riding through the darkness, the young husband leading the way. Alara's mind raced through possibilities. Hemorrhage, placenta previa, abruption. Any of them could kill mother and child both. The homestead was little more than a shack, but there was light in the window. They dismounted and Alara rushed inside. The scene was chaos. A woman lay on a bed, her face gray with pain and blood loss. Another woman, older, maybe her mother, hovered nearby, wringing her hands. Blood soaked the sheets, dripped onto the floor. Alara didn't waste time with questions. She scrubbed her hands in the basin, examined the patient quickly, efficiently. The baby was breech. The woman had been pushing for hours, tearing herself apart, trying to deliver a child that wouldn't come. "I need to turn the baby," Alara said. "It's going to hurt, a lot. But if I don't, you'll both die. Do you understand?" The woman nodded, too exhausted to speak. "Hold her shoulders," Alara told the older woman. "Don't let her move, no matter what. And you," she pointed at the husband, "boil water, lots of it. Bring me clean cloths." Then she went to work. Turning a breech baby internally was one of the most dangerous procedures in obstetrics. One wrong move and the uterus could rupture. But leaving it breech meant certain death for the child and likely death for the mother. Alara's hands moved with careful precision, feeling for the baby's position, gently manipulating. The woman screamed. Alara didn't stop. She couldn't afford to stop. Minutes felt like hours. Then, there. The baby shifted, turned, moved into position. "Now push," Alara commanded. "When I tell you, push hard." The woman pushed, once, twice. On the third push, the baby slid free in a rush of blood and fluid. Silence. Alara's heart stopped. The baby wasn't crying, wasn't moving. She grabbed the infant, cleared its airway, rubbed its chest. Nothing. She tipped it upside down, struck its back sharply. The baby gasped, coughed, and then let out a wail that was the most beautiful sound Alara had ever heard. "You have a daughter," she said, wrapping the infant in a clean cloth and handing her to the mother. The woman took her baby with shaking hands, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Alara turned her attention back to the mother. The bleeding was slowing but hadn't stopped. She packed the uterus, applied pressure, prayed that the woman's body would do what it was supposed to do and clamped down. Finally, mercifully, it did. Alara sat back, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Both patients were alive. Stable. It was all she could ask. Rourke appeared in the doorway with fresh water. He took one look at Alara, blood-spattered, exhausted, victorious, and something changed in his expression. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it. They did it. The mother fought like hell." Alara washed her hands, watching blood swirl in the basin. "But yes, they'll both live." The ride back to the ranch was silent. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Alara swayed in the saddle, so tired she could barely stay upright. "You should rest," Rourke said as they reached the ranch. "I should check on Tommy first." "I'll check on Tommy. You rest." It was a mark of how exhausted she was that Alara didn't argue. She stumbled to the bunkhouse, fell onto the bed still fully dressed, and was asleep before her head hit the pillow. She woke to voices. Afternoon sun slanted through the window. Someone was in the examination room. She could hear Martha talking, and another voice she didn't recognize. Alara dragged herself upright, splashed water on her face, and went to investigate. A line of people waited in the examination room. 5 of them. 6. Word had spread about the delivery, and suddenly everyone who'd been too proud or too skeptical to seek help before had decided maybe this woman doctor wasn't completely incompetent after all. Martha caught Alara's eye and shrugged, half apologetic, half amused. "They started showing up an hour ago. I told them you were sleeping, but they said they'd wait." Alara looked at the faces turned toward her. A man with a swollen knee, a woman with a persistent cough, a child with a rash. All the small medical problems that people learned to live with when there was no one to help. She took a breath, squared her shoulders. "All right," she said, "who's first?" By the end of that first day, Alara had seen 12 patients. By the end of the week, word had spread to homesteads 20 miles out. People came with injuries ignored for months, illnesses endured because there was no alternative, children who'd never been examined by anyone with actual medical training. The work was relentless and varied and exactly what Alara had trained for, even if the setting was nothing like she'd imagined. A month passed, then 2. Winter began its slow, grudging retreat. The snow melted in patches, turning the roads to rivers of mud that made travel treacherous. Alara worked through it all, treating everything from broken bones to pneumonia to a nasty case of appendicitis in a sheep herder who'd waited so long his chances were worse than Tommy's had been. That patient didn't make it. Alara sat with him through his last hours, holding his hand while he died far from family, far from anything except pain. She buried her failure in work, saw more patients, pushed harder. "You're going to kill yourself," Martha said one evening, finding Alara still in the examination room well past dark. "When's the last time you ate?" Alara had to think about it. "Breakfast? That was 14 hours ago." Martha set down a plate. "Eat. Now. I don't care if you're busy. I have case notes to—" "The case notes will wait. Eat." Alara ate, too tired to argue. The food was good. Martha's cooking always was. But it tasted like ashes. The sheepherder's face kept appearing in her mind. The way he'd looked at her with such hope, like she could perform miracles. The way that hope had faded as the infection spread, as his body gave up, as all her knowledge and training proved worthless against simple timing. "You can't save everyone," Martha said quietly. "I know that." Knowing it and accepting it are different things. Alara set down her fork. "He came to me too late. If he'd come even 2 days earlier, I could have—" But he didn't. Because he didn't trust doctors, didn't believe in surgery, thought he could tough it out. Martha's voice was firm. "That's not your fault." "Isn't it? If I'd been more established, if people trusted me more, maybe he would have come sooner. Or maybe he was just stubborn. People out here, they're used to handling things themselves. Used to pain. By the time they admit they need help, sometimes it's already too late." Martha began clearing the plate. "You did what you could. That has to be enough." But it didn't feel like enough. It never did. The next morning brought a different kind of problem. Alara was treating a woman for bronchitis when Rourke appeared in the doorway, his expression dark. "Need to talk to you," he said. "When you're done." Alara finished with her patient, prescribed rest and steam treatments, and collected her fee. After the woman left, she found Rourke in the other examination room, staring out the window. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Heard something in town yesterday. Thought you should know." Rourke turned to face her. "Sykes has been talking, saying you're not a real doctor, that you're practicing medicine without proper credentials, putting people at risk." Alara's stomach dropped. "I have credentials. I have my diploma from—" "I know that. You know that. But people hear 'woman doctor' and they start doubting. Add in one patient dying, even though it wasn't your fault, and suddenly the talk gets louder." Rourke's jaw was tight. "He's trying to turn people against you. Why? What have I done to him?" "Your competition. McGraw used to buy his medical supplies through Sykes, marked them up, made a profit. You're buying direct from Fort Collins, cutting Sykes out." Rourke's expression was grim. "It's about money. Always is with him." Alara felt fury rise in her chest, hot and sharp. "So what am I supposed to do? Pay him off? Buy through him at inflated prices just to keep the peace?" "No. You keep doing what you're doing, but be prepared for pushback." Rourke paused. "And maybe show your credentials, publicly. Make it clear you're legitimate." "I shouldn't have to prove myself more than any man would." "You're right. You shouldn't, but you do." Rourke's voice was gentle. "That's the reality. You can rail against it or you can work with it. Your choice." Alara wanted to scream, wanted to take her diploma and shove it in Sykes' face, wanted to demand the same respect that would have been automatic if she'd been born male. But anger wouldn't help. Anger never helped. "Fine," she said tightly. "I'll make it clear." That Sunday, Alara did something she'd been avoiding since arriving in Ashford Bend. She went to church. The building was the same one she'd noticed that first day, the converted grain storage. Inside, it was surprisingly well maintained, wooden pews, a pulpit, hymn books that looked older than the town itself. People filled the space, packed shoulder to shoulder, and every head turned when Alara walked in. She'd dressed carefully, her best dress, hair pinned up properly, medical bag left behind. She looked respectable, professional, unthreatening. Everything she'd learned to present when she needed acceptance more than she needed authenticity. The preacher, a thin man with burning eyes, watched her take a seat in the back. His sermon was about faith and works, delivered with the kind of fervor that suggested he believed every word. Alara listened with half an ear, more interested in the congregation. These were her patients, her potential patients, the people whose trust she needed. After the service, she stood near the door and waited. People filed past, some nodding politely, others avoiding her eyes. Then Sykes appeared, his wife on his arm. "Dr. Quinn?" His voice was cold. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I'm part of this community, Mr. Sykes, same as anyone." Alara kept her voice level. "I understand you have concerns about my qualifications." The conversations around them died. Everyone was listening now. "Well, yes," Sykes said, looking pleased to have an audience. "It's just that we only have your word that you're trained. For all you know, I could be lying." Alara pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "This is my diploma from Massachusetts General Hospital. Graduated top of my class in 1891. I also have letters of recommendation from 3 supervising physicians, my surgical certification, and testimonials from patients I treated in Boston. I brought them today because apparently my work here isn't evidence enough." She handed the diploma to the nearest person, a woman she'd treated for influenza 2 weeks prior. The woman unfolded it, read it, passed it on. It made its way through the crowd, hand to hand, until it reached Sykes. He stared at it for a long moment. Anyone can forge a piece of paper. They can, but they can't forge the knowledge to perform surgery successfully. They can't fake the ability to turn a breech baby or diagnose appendicitis or treat pneumonia. Alara's voice carried across the churchyard. "I've been practicing here for 2 months. In that time, I've seen over 60 patients. I performed 3 major surgeries and dozens of minor procedures. Most of my patients have recovered. Some haven't. That's the nature of medicine. But every single one received care from someone who knows what they're doing." "The sheep herder died," someone called out. "He did. He came to me 4 days after his appendix ruptured. By then, the infection had spread too far. I told him the odds. He chose to try surgery anyway. Sometimes we lose." Alara looked around at all the faces watching her. "But I tried. I didn't give up. I didn't refuse to treat him because his chances were poor. That's what doctors do. We try." Silence. Then the woman who'd had the difficult delivery pushed through the crowd. She was holding her baby, healthy, thriving, 3 weeks old now. "My daughter wouldn't be alive without Dr. Quinn," she said clearly. "She was breech, stuck. I was bleeding to death. Dr. Quinn turned her, saved us both." She looked directly at Sykes. "You want to question her credentials, fine. But I'm standing here with my baby because of her. That's all the proof I need." Another voice. "She fixed my knee. I couldn't walk right for 2 years. Now I can. Treated my son's fever when it wouldn't break. Set my arm after I fell off the barn roof. Healed straight, no problems." One by one, patients spoke up. Not all of them. Some still looked skeptical, uncertain. But enough. Enough to matter. Sykes' face darkened. "Well, I suppose if people want to trust their lives to a woman, that's their business. Just don't come crying to me when something goes wrong." He stalked off, his wife scurrying after him. The crowd began to disperse, but several people approached Alara. "That took guts," one man said, "standing up to Sykes like that." "I was just stating facts. Facts don't always matter out here, but you made them matter." He tipped his hat. Respect. Alara walked back to the ranch feeling lighter than she had in weeks. It wasn't total victory. Sykes would still cause trouble, still spread doubt where he could. But she'd claimed her ground, made it clear she wasn't going anywhere. Tommy was waiting when she arrived, practically bouncing with energy. 4 weeks post-surgery and he'd recovered completely, the scar on his abdomen the only evidence of how close he'd come to dying. "Dad says I can start helping with the horses tomorrow," he announced. "Real work, not just light chores." Did he now? Alara glanced at Rourke, who was repairing fence nearby. "Light work with the horses," Rourke clarified. "Grooming, feeding, nothing strenuous." "I'm not an invalid," Tommy protested. "No, you're a 12-year-old who had major surgery a month ago. There's a difference." Alara softened her tone. "I know you feel fine, but your body is still healing inside. Push too hard, too fast, and you could hurt yourself. Give it another few weeks. Then we'll talk about real work." Tommy made a face but didn't argue. He'd learned that arguing with Alara was pointless. That afternoon, while Alara was organizing her medical supplies, Rourke came in. He'd been doing that more lately, finding excuses to check on the clinic, to talk, to just be present. Alara wasn't entirely sure what to make of it. "Heard what happened at church," he said. "News travels fast." "Always does." Rourke leaned against the door frame. "You handled it well." "I handled it the only way I could, by telling the truth." Alara set down the bottle of carbolic acid she'd been inventorying. "But it shouldn't be necessary. My work should speak for itself." "It does. To people who've seen it, the rest need convincing." Rourke paused. "You know, when you first arrived, I thought you were crazy. Coming out here alone, thinking you could practice medicine in a place that didn't want you. But you're not crazy. You're just stubborn." "Is that a compliment?" "Out here? Yeah, it is." He smiled slightly. "Stubborn keeps you alive when everything else fails." Something in his tone made Alara look at him more closely. "You're worried about something." "Storm's coming. Big one, if the signs are right. Could hit as early as tomorrow." Rourke straightened. "We're prepared. Got supplies. Animals secured. But if anyone needs medical help during it, they're stuck until it passes." "How long do these storms usually last?" "Anywhere from a day to a week. Hard to predict." Rourke's expression was serious. "Just wanted you to know. In case you need to stock up on anything, prepare the clinic for patients who might need to stay." "I'll do that. Thank you for the warning." He nodded and left. Alara spent the rest of the day preparing, checking her supplies of laudanum and morphine, making sure she had plenty of bandages and surgical thread, setting up the patient recovery room with extra blankets. If the storm was as bad as Rourke predicted, someone would inevitably get hurt. The storm hit that night with a fury that made the previous one look gentle, wind that sounded like freight trains, snow that fell so thick Alara couldn't see the main house from the clinic windows. The temperature plummeted, turning the world into a frozen hell. Alara sat by the stove, reading medical journals by lamplight, and waited. Experience had taught her that emergencies always came at the worst possible times. It was practically a law of nature. The emergency came at dawn. Someone was pounding on the clinic door, shouting. Alara grabbed her coat and yanked the door open. One of Rourke's ranch hands stood there, covered in snow and ice. "It's Mr. Rourke," the man gasped. "Accident in the barn. Beam fell on him. He's hurt bad." Alara's heart stopped. "How bad?" "Real bad. Can't move. Bleeding. You gotta come." She grabbed her medical bag and followed him into the storm. The 50 yards to the barn felt like 50 miles. Wind tore at her clothes, snow blinded her, cold bit through every layer she wore. The ranch hand gripped her arm, keeping her from losing her way. Inside the barn, chaos. The roof had partially collapsed, a rafter had given way under the weight of snow, and underneath the wreckage, pinned from the waist down, was Caleb Rourke. He was conscious, that was something, but his face was gray with pain and shock, and there was blood, too much blood, pooling on the barn floor. "Alara," his voice was tight. "Got myself in trouble." "So I see." She knelt beside him, assessing quickly. The beam across his legs was massive, oak, probably 300 pounds. Moving it wrong could make everything worse. "How long have you been under this?" 20 minutes, maybe 30. Rourke's breathing was shallow. Came in to check on the horses. Heard cracking. Didn't get out fast enough. Alara examined what she could reach. His right leg was definitely broken. She could see the unnatural angle even through his pants. The left was trapped under the beam at a bad angle. There was too much blood for just broken bones. Something had torn. "We need to lift this beam," she said to the gathered ranch hands. "Carefully, straight up, no twisting, on my count." "Wait." Rourke grabbed her wrist. "Before you do, you need to know, I can't feel my left leg. Not at all." Alara's blood went cold. No sensation meant nerve damage, or worse, spinal involvement. If they moved him wrong, they could paralyze him permanently. "All right," she forced her voice to stay calm. "We're going to do this very carefully. I need to examine your back first." She managed to slide her hands underneath him, feeling along his spine. No obvious deformity, no step-off that would indicate a fracture. But that didn't mean there wasn't damage. "Can you wiggle your toes?" she asked. "Right foot, yes. Left, no." Nerve damage, then. From the pressure of the beam or from something else. No way to know until they got him out. "Lift," Alara commanded. "Slow and steady." 4 men grabbed the beam and heaved. It rose inch by agonizing inch. As soon as there was clearance, Alara pulled Rourke free, moving him as carefully as possible to flat ground. The damage was worse than she'd feared. His left leg was mangled, bone visible through torn flesh, blood everywhere. The right leg was broken, but less severe. And there was something wrong with his pelvis, the way he was lying, the pain in his face when she pressed certain spots. "Tommy," Rourke gasped. "Don't let Tommy see me like this." "Martha's keeping him in the house." Alara was already opening her bag. "I need to get you to the clinic. We need to move fast." "Alara, tell me straight. How bad is it?" She met his eyes. "Bad. Your left leg is severely damaged. Right leg broken. Possible pelvic fracture. Blood loss is significant. I need to operate to repair what I can." "And if you can't repair it?" "We'll deal with that when we come to it. Right now, we focus on keeping you alive." She turned to the ranch hands. "Get aboard. Something flat and sturdy. We need to move him without bending his spine." They rigged a makeshift stretcher from barn boards. Moving Rourke onto it took 3 men and all of Alara's concentration. He didn't scream. His jaw was locked too tight for that. But she could see the agony in every line of his face. Getting him from the barn to the clinic was a nightmare. The storm was still raging. Snow had drifted against the clinic door. By the time they got Rourke inside and onto the examination table, Alara was shaking with cold and fear. "Everyone out except Martha," she ordered. "I need space to work." Martha appeared, already rolling up her sleeves. "What do you need?" "Boiled water, clean towels, every lamp we have. I need light. And whiskey. Lots of it." Alara began cutting away Rourke's clothes. The fabric was frozen to his skin in places, stuck with blood. "You gonna be able to save the leg?" Martha asked quietly. Alara looked at the mangled flesh, the visible bone, the blood that wouldn't stop flowing despite the tourniquet she'd applied. "I don't know." The honest answer, the only answer she had. She spent the next hour fighting to stop the bleeding, to clean the wounds, to assess what could be saved and what was too damaged. The left leg was a disaster. Multiple fractures, torn arteries, muscle damage that extended from knee to hip. Every time she thought she had the bleeding controlled, another vessel would let go. Rourke drifted in and out of consciousness. When he was awake, Alara gave him morphine. When he was out, she worked faster. "You need to make a decision," Martha said finally. "He can't take much more blood loss." Alara knew. She'd known for the last 30 minutes, but saying it out loud made it real. "If I amputate, he has a chance. If I try to save the leg and fail, he dies on this table. And if you save the leg, if I save it, he might never walk on it again. The nerve damage alone." Alara stared at the ruined limb. "But at least he'd still have it." "That's not a choice, Doc. That's a gamble." "All of medicine is a gamble." Alara looked at Rourke's face. He was unconscious now, his breathing shallow. What would he want? He'd want to walk, to work, to be the man he was. Martha's voice was firm. Losing that leg would kill him. Maybe not his body, but everything else. You know it would. Alara did know. She'd seen it before. Men who survived amputations but never recovered from the loss. Who gave up. Who faded away even though their bodies kept breathing. "Then I try to save it," she said. It was the hardest decision she'd ever made, and she wouldn't know if it was the right one for weeks, maybe months. She went back to work with steady hands and a mind that refused to consider failure. Piece by piece, she rebuilt what the beam had destroyed, tied off bleeders, set broken bones as best she could, cleaned tissue that would never fully heal but might, with luck, regain some function. It was delicate work, painstaking work, the kind that required absolute focus. 4 hours later, she stepped back. The leg was intact, wrapped in bandages, splinted to prevent movement, but intact. Rourke was still alive. Barely. His pulse was thready, his breathing labored. He'd lost so much blood that Alara wasn't sure his body could recover. But he was alive. Now we wait, she told Martha. Will he make it? I don't know. Alara stripped off her bloody gloves. The next 24 hours will tell us. If infection sets in, if the bleeding starts again, if his body just gives up. She couldn't finish the sentence. You did everything you could. Did I? Alara looked at her hands. They were shaking now, the adrenaline draining away. I chose to try saving the leg. That choice might kill him. Maybe amputation would have been faster, safer. Maybe nothing. Martha gripped Alara's shoulders. You made the call. You always have to make the call. That's what being a doctor means. Second-guessing yourself doesn't help anyone. Alara nodded, but the doubt didn't leave. It never did. She stayed by Rourke's bedside through the night. The storm raged outside. Inside, the only sounds were his labored breathing and the crackle of the fire. Alara dozed in the chair, waking every time his breathing changed, checking his pulse, his temperature, the bandages for signs of fresh bleeding. Dawn came gray and cold. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried in snow. Rourke's eyes opened just after sunrise. Still here, he whispered. Still here. Alara checked his pulse, stronger than before. How do you feel? Like a barn fell on me. He tried to smile. My leg, did you... It's still attached. Whether you'll walk on it again, I can't say. The damage was extensive. Nerve damage, muscle damage, multiple fractures, but I saved it. She met his eyes. I didn't know if that was the right call, but I made it. Thank you. Rourke's hand found hers. For trying, for not giving up. I never give up, Alara said softly. It's my worst quality. Or your best. Outside, she could hear voices. Tommy, calling for his father. Martha, trying to keep him calm. The sound of the boy's fear cut through Alara like a blade. Let him in, Rourke said. You're not strong enough. Let him in. He needs to see I'm alive. Alara went to the door and opened it. Tommy stood there, his face white with terror. When he saw his father, he ran to the bedside. Dad! Hey, son. Rourke's voice was weak but steady. I'm okay, just banged up. Martha said a beam fell on you. She said you might die. Tommy's voice cracked. Takes more than a beam to kill a Rourke. Rourke squeezed his son's hand. Dr. Quinn patched me up. I'm going to be fine. Tommy looked at Alara with eyes full of desperate hope. He is going to be fine, right? Alara couldn't lie to him. He's going to live. Beyond that, we'll have to wait and see. Recovery will take time. Months, probably, and there may be permanent damage to his leg. But he'll live. Yes, he'll live. Tommy's face crumpled. He buried his head against his father's shoulder and cried, big gulping sobs of relief and fear and exhaustion. Rourke held him with the one arm that wasn't strapped down, murmuring quiet words Alara couldn't hear. She slipped out of the room, giving them privacy. Outside, the sun was breaking through the clouds, turning the snow-covered world into something almost beautiful. Almost. Martha found her standing in the doorway. You did good, Doc. We'll see. Alara watched the light spread across the valley. We'll see. The first week was hell. Rourke's body fought against everything. The trauma, the blood loss, the brutal reality of bones trying to knit themselves back together under conditions that would make any hospital surgeon weep. His fever spiked on day 3, climbing so high that Alara packed him in snow-soaked sheets and spent the night sponging his burning skin with cold water. On day 5, infection bloomed in the surgical site despite every precaution she'd taken. She drained it, cleaned it, redressed it with hands that wanted to shake but couldn't afford to. Through it all, Rourke didn't complain. He gritted his teeth through dressing changes that had to hurt like hellfire, swallowed the bitter medicines Alara forced on him, endured the endless examinations, the poking and prodding, the questions about sensation and movement that must have felt like torture. Can you feel this? Alara would ask, touching different points along his left leg. No. This? No. How about here? A pause. Maybe. I'm not sure. It was the uncertainty that ate at both of them. Some days he swore he could feel pressure, temperature, something. Other days, nothing. The muscles in his leg twitched occasionally, a good sign, suggesting the nerves weren't completely dead, but whether they'd regenerate enough for him to walk was anyone's guess. Tommy appointed himself his father's keeper. The boy brought meals, read aloud from books until his voice went hoarse, helped Martha change bedding and carry water. He was trying so hard to be useful that Alara's heart ached watching him. "You need to rest too," she told Tommy one evening, finding him asleep in the chair beside Rourke's bed. "I'm fine," Tommy mumbled, jerking awake. "You're exhausted. Go to the house, sleep in your own bed for once." "But what if Dad needs something?" "Then I'll handle it. That's my job." Alara softened her voice. "Your father needs you strong, not worn out. Take care of yourself so you can help him when he's ready to start moving." Tommy left reluctantly. Alara settled into the vacated chair and found Rourke watching her. "You're good with him," he said quietly. "He's a good kid, easy to be good with. He thinks the world of you, talks about you constantly. Dr. Quinn says this, Dr. Quinn did that." Rourke's smile was faint. "You've become his hero." "I'm nobody's hero. I'm just doing my job." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Rourke shifted slightly, grimaced at the pain. "Because from where I'm lying, you've done a lot more than just your job. You saved my son when I'd already written him off. You're saving me when most doctors would have cut off the leg and called it done. You fight for people. That's not just a job." Alara didn't know what to say to that. She changed the subject. "We need to talk about therapy. Your leg. Once the bones start to set, we'll need to work on range of motion, muscle strength. It's going to hurt. Everything already hurts, can't get much worse." "It can always get worse." Alara met his eyes. "I need you to be honest with me. About the pain. About what you're feeling or not feeling. If you hide things because you think it makes you tough, you'll heal wrong, or not at all." "I'm not hiding anything." "Aren't you?" She gestured to the way he was holding himself, rigid and careful. "You've been lying in the same position for 2 hours. Your back must be screaming, but you haven't asked for help adjusting because you don't want to seem weak." Rourke's jaw tightened. "I can handle. This isn't about what you can handle. It's about what's best for your recovery." Alara stood. "Let me help you shift positions. You'll heal faster if your muscles don't atrophy from staying still." She helped him roll onto his side, supporting the injured leg, adjusting pillows. He didn't make a sound, but she saw the sweat break out on his forehead. "You don't have to be stoic with me," she said quietly. "I know it hurts. Pretending it doesn't won't change anything." "Old habits." Rourke's voice was strained. "Out here, you learn early that showing weakness gets you killed. Or worse, gets the people depending on you killed. I'm not one of your ranch hands, and this isn't the frontier code. This is medicine." Alara finished arranging the pillows. "Your strength isn't measured by how much pain you can silently endure. It's measured by whether you heal." Something in his expression shifted. "You always this blunt? Would you prefer I lie to you?" "No." He almost smiled. "I wouldn't." The days blurred together. Alara divided her time between Rourke's recovery and the other patients who kept arriving despite the harsh weather. A child with scarlet fever. A man who'd lost 3 fingers to frostbite. A woman having a miscarriage. Alone and terrified. Each case demanded everything she had. She was treating a ranch hand's infected wound when Martha appeared in the doorway, looking worried. "Doc, Sykes is here. Says he needs to talk to you." Alara finished bandaging the wound and sent the ranch hand on his way before going to meet Sykes. He stood in the clinic's waiting area, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Mr. Sykes, what can I do for you?" "It's my wife." The words came out reluctantly. "She's been feeling poorly, won't eat, losing weight. I told her it's nothing, but she's worried, and she asked me to—" He trailed off. "To ask the woman doctor for help?" Alara kept her voice neutral. "Even though you've spent the last 2 months telling everyone I'm a fraud?" Sykes's face reddened. "Look, I don't expect you to help, not after what I said. But my wife, she's scared, and I thought, bring her tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Alara turned back toward the examination room. I'll examine her properly. No charge for the consultation. Wait, just like that? After everything After everything you said, yes. Alara looked back at him. Because unlike you, Mr. Sykes, I don't let personal grudges interfere with medical care. Your wife deserves treatment regardless of what her husband thinks of me. Sykes left looking shaken. Martha, who'd been listening, shook her head. You're too soft on him. I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for her. Alara washed her hands. Besides, treating his wife successfully will do more to change his mind than any argument ever could. Mrs. Sykes arrived the next morning looking frightened and frail. She was younger than her husband by at least 20 years, with the worn look of someone who'd been sick for longer than she wanted to admit. Alara examined her thoroughly, asking questions, taking notes. The symptoms painted a clear picture: unexplained weight loss, fatigue, pain in the upper abdomen. When Alara palpated the area, she felt it, a mass, firm and irregular. Her heart sank. Mrs. Sykes, I need to be direct with you. I felt a growth in your abdomen. It could be several things, but given your other symptoms, I'm concerned it might be a tumor. The color drained from the woman's face. A tumor? You mean cancer? Possibly. I can't be certain without surgery to examine it directly, but yes, that's my concern. Can you remove it? Alara hesitated. The location is complicated. It's near several major blood vessels and organs. Surgery would be extremely risky, especially out here without proper facilities, but leaving it... She didn't finish the sentence. I'll die anyway, Mrs. Sykes said flatly. That's what you're not saying. Without treatment, yes. Likely within months. And with treatment? With surgery? You'd have a chance, not a guarantee. The surgery itself could kill you, or you could survive it and the cancer could still spread, but at least you'd be fighting. Alara met her eyes. The choice is yours. Mrs. Sykes was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I want to fight. My husband, he's not an easy man, but he needs me, and I'm not ready to give up. Then we'll fight. Alara squeezed her hand. I'll need a few days to prepare. This isn't a simple procedure. I'll need help, supplies, the right conditions. Can you wait that long? I've waited this long without knowing what was wrong. A few more days won't matter. Alara told Sykes the diagnosis that afternoon. He took it badly, raging about incompetent doctors and impossible diagnoses, but underneath the bluster was pure terror. His wife was dying, and the only person who might save her was the woman he'd tried to run out of town. Can you actually do this? He demanded. This surgery? I've assisted in similar procedures. I've never performed one alone. Alara wouldn't lie to him. But I'm the best chance your wife has. The only chance, really. And if you fail? Then I fail. But she dies either way without trying. Sykes looked 10 years older than he had that morning. Do it. Whatever you need. Whatever it costs. Just save her. Alara spent the next 3 days preparing obsessively. She consulted every medical text she had, reviewing anatomy, surgical techniques, potential complications. She sterilized instruments until her hands were raw from the carbolic acid. She converted the larger patient room into a proper surgical theater, scrubbing every surface, arranging lights for maximum visibility. Rourke watched her preparations from his bed with sharp eyes. This is the big one, isn't it? It's complicated. More complicated than anything I've done here. You scared? Alara paused in her work. Terrified. If I make one wrong move, she dies. If I'm too slow, she dies. If the tumor has spread further than I think, she dies. There are a dozen ways this could go wrong, and maybe one way it goes right. But you're doing it anyway. Because not doing it guarantees she dies. At least this way there's a chance. You could refuse, say it's too risky. No one would blame you. I'd blame me. Alara resumed organizing instruments. And she'd be dead. I can live with a lot of things. That's not one of them. The surgery was scheduled for dawn. Alara barely slept the night before, running through the procedure in her mind, anticipating complications, planning contingencies. When Mrs. Sykes arrived with her husband, she looked calm in a way that suggested she'd made her peace with whatever happened. I trust you, she told Alara simply. Those 3 words felt like the weight of the world. The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of the most delicate, terrifying work Alara had ever done. The tumor was exactly where she'd feared, wrapped around blood vessels, adhering to the stomach wall. Removing it required patience she didn't feel and steadiness she had to force into her hands. Martha assisted, passing instruments, managing the anesthesia, keeping Mrs. Sykes's vital signs stable. At one point, a bleeder let go, and Alara had to clamp it in seconds to prevent catastrophic hemorrhage. Another time, the patient's breathing became labored, and Martha had to adjust the chloroform level with precision. But slowly, piece by piece, Alara excised the tumor. It came out whole, dark and ugly, and about the size of her fist. She sent up a silent prayer to whatever forces governed the universe that she'd gotten it all. Closing took another hour, layer by layer, stitch by stitch, until finally she tied off the last suture and stepped back. Mrs. Sykes was still breathing, still alive. "She made it through," Martha said softly. "She made it through the surgery. The next few days will tell us if she survives." Alara stripped off her gloves. Every muscle in her body was shaking with exhaustion. "Get her husband. He should be here when she wakes." Sykes sat by his wife's bedside for the next 48 hours, barely moving. Alara checked on them regularly, monitoring for signs of infection or internal bleeding or any of the 100 things that could still go wrong. On the third day, Mrs. Sykes was sitting up and eating broth. "I think I'm going to live," she told Alara, wonder in her voice. "I think you are too." Alara checked the surgical site. Clean, healing well. "The tumor is out. Whether we got all the cancer, only time will tell, but you've got a fighting chance now." Sykes found Alara later that day. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, his face haggard and worn. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble, "for everything I said about you, everything I did. You saved my wife's life. You didn't have to, not after how I treated you, but you did it anyway. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Not for you." Alara's voice was firm. "But I'll accept your apology, and I hope you'll stop spreading lies about my credentials." "I'll do better than that. I'll tell everyone what you did, what you can do." Sykes met her eyes. "You're a real doctor. Better than McGraw ever was, if I'm being honest. This town's lucky to have you." It was, Alara thought, the closest thing to a victory she'd had since arriving in Ashford Bend. Word of Mrs. Sykes's surgery spread faster than wildfire. Within a week, Alara had more patients than she could handle. People came from homesteads 50 miles away, seeking treatment for ailments they'd been living with for years. A man with a hernia that needed repair, a woman with gallstones, a child with a cleft palate that could be partially corrected with surgery. Alara worked herself to exhaustion, operating, treating, teaching people how to care for themselves between visits. She hired one of the ranch hands' wives as an assistant, a capable woman named Sarah who had a natural talent for nursing. Together, they transformed the clinic into something that resembled a real medical practice. Through it all, Rourke healed, slowly, painfully, but he healed. 6 weeks after the accident, Alara had him sit up for the first time. It took 3 people to support him, and the effort left him gray-faced and sweating, but he did it. "How's the leg feel?" Alara asked, checking his pulse. Like someone's driving hot nails through it. But there was something different in his voice. "But I can feel it. The pain. That's something, right?" "That's everything." Alara couldn't quite hide her relief. "Pain means the nerves are working. It's a good sign." 2 weeks later, she had him put weight on the leg for the first time. He stood for maybe 10 seconds before his leg buckled, but those 10 seconds were progress. "I'm never going to walk right again, am I?" he asked that night, frustration sharp in his voice. "Define right." Alara was wrapping fresh bandages around the surgical site. "Will you run marathons? Probably not. Will you be able to walk, work, live your life?" "I think so. With time and effort and more physical therapy than you're going to want to endure." "How much time?" "Months, maybe a year, maybe longer." She secured the bandage. "Recovery isn't linear. Some days will be better than others, but you're already ahead of where I thought you'd be at this point. Because you're a good doctor. Because you're stubborn, and you have something to live for." Alara gestured toward the window, where Tommy was visible working with the horses. "That boy needs you. That's worth fighting for." He's got you now, too. Something in the way he said it made Alara pause. I'm his doctor, not a replacement for his father. I didn't say replacement. I said he's got you. Rourke met her eyes. So do I, if we're being honest. I don't know what we would have done without you. Without your skill, your stubbornness, your refusal to give up even when it would have been easier. He paused. You could have amputated, could have taken the safe route, but you didn't. You fought for my leg like it was your own. Because it mattered to you. That made it matter to me. Why? The question hung in the air between them. Alara could have deflected, could have given some professional answer about patient care and medical ethics, but she was tired of deflecting. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a job, she said quietly. This place, these people, you and Tommy, you became something more. I don't know exactly what, but more. Rourke was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Sarah used to say that some people come into your life and change everything without meaning to, without even trying. They just show up and suddenly the world looks different. I'm not trying to replace your wife. I know, you're not replacing anyone. You're just... He searched for words. You're here, and I'm glad you are. It wasn't a declaration, wasn't even close to one, but it felt like the beginning of something neither of them was quite ready to name. Spring came late that year, arriving in fits and starts with false warmth followed by killing frosts. But gradually, the snow retreated. The roads became passable. Green things pushed up through the mud, stubborn and determined. Rourke took his first real steps 3 months after the accident. Alara and Martha supported him on either side as he shuffled across the clinic floor, his left leg dragging slightly but bearing weight. Tommy watched with his heart in his eyes. You're doing it, Dad. I'm walking like a drunk horse, Rourke gasped. But yeah, I'm walking. It wasn't pretty. His gait would never be normal. The nerve damage had seen to that. But he could walk, could work, could live the life he'd built for himself and his son. That evening, Alara found him outside the clinic, leaning on a crutch and staring at the mountains. The sunset painted them in shades of gold and purple. Beautiful, isn't it? He said without turning around. It is. Alara stood beside him. How does it feel, being on your feet again? Like I've been given something I'd already lost. Like a second chance. He glanced at her. I know you don't like being thanked. You always wave it off, say you're just doing your job. But I'm going to thank you anyway. You gave me my life back. That's not nothing. You fought for it. I just provided the tools. You provided more than that. You provided hope when I had none. Certainty when I was ready to give up. A reason to believe that maybe losing my leg didn't have to mean losing everything. Rourke shifted his weight, testing the injured leg. The town's changed because of you. People who would have died are alive. People who would have suffered are healing. You've built something real here. We've built something, Alara corrected. You gave me a place to work. Martha and Sarah gave me help. The patients gave me trust. It wasn't just me. But it started with you. With your refusal to accept that being a woman meant you couldn't be a doctor. Rourke smiled slightly. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. Thank the stars for that. They stood in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The wind carried the smell of growing things, of earth waking up after a long winter. What happens now? Rourke asked finally. With your practice. With everything. Now I keep working, keep learning, keep trying to help people who need it. Alara considered. There's talk of the Territorial Commission wanting to establish a proper hospital. They've asked if I'd be interested in heading it. Are you? I don't know. A hospital would mean more patients, better facilities, a real staff. But it would also mean politics, bureaucracy, answering to people who might not respect my methods. She shook her head. Right now, I'm content here, building something on my own terms. Our terms, Rourke said quietly, if you're staying at the ranch. Is that an invitation to stay permanently? I don't know what it is. He turned to face her fully. You showed up in my life when I least expected it, when I least wanted it, honestly, and you turned everything upside down, saved my son, saved me, Made me question everything I thought I knew about strength and capability and what it means to be worth something. Alara's heart was beating faster than it should. Caleb, I'm not good with words, never have been. But I know that somewhere along the way I stopped seeing you as just the doctor who saved Tommy. I started seeing you as more, as someone I trust, someone I respect, someone I... He trailed off, frustrated. Someone you what? Someone I don't want to lose. The words came out rough. I know it's complicated. I know you've got your own life, your own plans, and I know I'm not exactly prime material anymore, with a bum leg and a kid and a ranch that barely makes ends meet. But I wanted you to know that you matter. To me. To us. Alara didn't know what to say. She'd spent so long focused on her work, on proving herself, on fighting for respect in a world that didn't want to give it, that she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen as just a person. Not a doctor, not a woman trying to do a man's job, just Alara. You matter to me too, she said finally. Both of you, this place. It's become... She struggled to find words that wouldn't sound sentimental. It's become home. I didn't expect that, but it has. Then stay. Keep building your practice. Keep being part of this. Rourke's hand found hers, rough and calloused and warm. Not because you have to, because you want to. I want to, Alara said, and she meant it. The weeks that followed felt different, not dramatically so. The work didn't change, the patients still came, the territory still demanded everything Alara had to give, but something had shifted in the spaces between the medicine and the daily grind, in the way Rourke looked at her across the dinner table, in the easy silence they'd learned to share while she changed his bandages and he pretended it didn't hurt, in the moments when their hands would brush and neither pulled away quite as quickly as they should have. Tommy noticed, of course. The boy was too sharp not to. Are you going to marry my dad? He asked one morning while helping Alara organize medical supplies. Alara nearly dropped the bottle of laudanum she was holding. What? You heard me. Tommy didn't look up from the bandages he was rolling. He likes you. You like him. That's how it works, right? That's not... It's more complicated than that. Why? Because you're a doctor? Tommy's voice held that particular teenage skepticism that suggested he'd already thought this through. My mom was smart too. Dad always said she was smarter than him. Didn't stop them from being happy. Your father loved your mother very much. I'm not trying to replace her. I know that. I'm not stupid. Tommy set down the bandages and looked at her directly. But she's been gone 3 years and Dad's been alone that whole time. Well, not alone. He's had me. But you know what I mean. Alara did know. Tommy, your father and I are friends, colleagues. He's my patient. He was your patient. Now he's walking around complaining about the physical therapy, arguing with you about when he can get back to real work. That's not a patient. That's just Dad being stubborn. Tommy grinned slightly. And you being stubborn right back. When did you get so wise? Had to grow up fast. The grin faded. When Mom died and then when Dad almost died, I learned that waiting around for the right time doesn't work. Sometimes you just have to say what's true and deal with it. The wisdom in those words, coming from a 12-year-old, hit Alara harder than she wanted to admit. But before she could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway. Doc, we've got a problem. Ryder just came in from the Morrison place. Says there's been an accident. Multiple injuries. They're asking for you. Alara grabbed her bag without hesitation. How many injured? At least 4. Wagon overturned on the pass. Sounds bad. The Morrison homestead was 15 miles away, most of it rough terrain. Alara saddled her horse. She'd gotten better at riding out of pure necessity, and made the journey in under 2 hours. What she found when she arrived made her stomach turn. The wagon had gone off the road and rolled down a steep embankment. The driver was dead, his neck broken in the fall. His wife was conscious, but had a compound fracture in her forearm, the bone visible through torn flesh. Their 2 children, both under 10, had various injuries, one with a probable concussion, the other with a deep gash across her scalp that had bled frighteningly but looked worse than it was. Alara set up a triage system right there in the Morrisons' front yard. The head wound first. It needed stitching immediately to stop the bleeding. Then the concussion, which required careful monitoring. The compound fracture would take the most time and skill. She worked for 6 hours straight, stitched the child's scalp with tiny, precise sutures that would minimize scarring, kept the concussed boy awake and talking, watching for signs of brain swelling, set the woman's arm, cleaned the wound thoroughly to prevent infection, and splinted it with boards from the wrecked wagon. By the time she finished, the sun was setting and every muscle in her body screamed for rest. But the family was stable. The children would recover fully. The mother would regain use of her arm if she followed Alara's instructions for care. "You saved my babies," the woman whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My husband's gone, but you saved my babies." Alara had no words for that kind of gratitude. She just squeezed the woman's good hand and promised to return in 3 days to check on them. The ride back to the ranch was dark and treacherous. Alara's horse picked its way carefully along the trail while she fought to stay awake in the saddle. She was so tired she almost didn't see the riders until they were right in front of her. 3 men, rough-looking, spread across the trail in a way that was clearly deliberate. "Well, well," the one in the middle said. "Look what we got here. Lady doctor, all alone." Alara's hand went to her medical bag, where she kept a small pistol for emergencies. "Gentlemen, I'm just passing through. I don't want any trouble." "No trouble. Just a conversation." The man edged his horse closer. "Heard about you. Heard you got quite the setup at the Rourke place. Medical supplies, money. Medicines that fetch a good price if you know where to sell them. If you're looking to rob me, you'll be disappointed. I carry very little cash." "Not you, sweetheart. The clinic." He smiled, showing gaps where teeth should have been. "We're going to pay it a visit. Tonight. You're going to help us get what we need, nice and quiet. Nobody gets hurt." Fear spiked through Alara's exhaustion. "There are people at the ranch, armed people. You won't get far. Ranch hands are all out on the north pasture, saw them ourselves, just that cripple rancher and his kid in the main house. They won't hear nothing from the clinic." The man's smile widened. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to ride ahead of us, real calm, open up that clinic, show us where the good stuff is. Then we're gone, and you forget you ever saw us. And if I refuse, then we tie you up, do it anyway, and maybe pay a visit to that kid. Heard he's about the right age to fetch a price down south." The threat against Tommy made something cold and hard settle in Alara's chest. She thought fast. These men didn't know about Sarah staying late tonight to inventory supplies. Didn't know that Rourke, despite his injured leg, could still shoot better than most men with 2 good legs. Didn't know that Tommy had been learning to handle a rifle under his father's instruction. "All right," she said slowly. "I'll cooperate. But the clinic's locked. I'll need to get the key from the main house." "Nice try. You got a key on you. Saw it on that chain around your neck earlier." The man gestured with his gun. "Move. And don't try anything stupid." Alara rode ahead, her mind racing. The clinic was maybe 300 yards from the main house. If she could make noise, create some kind of distraction, Rourke might hear. Might investigate. It was a thin chance, but it was all she had. They reached the clinic in the darkness. Alara dismounted, moving slowly, buying time. The key was indeed around her neck, hidden under her shirt. She pulled it out with shaking hands that weren't entirely an act. "That's it," the leader said. "Nice and easy." Alara unlocked the door and stepped inside. The clinic was dark except for the banked coals in the stove. She moved toward the lamp, but one of the men grabbed her arm. "No lights. Don't want to attract attention. I can't show you where the supplies are in the dark." "Then we'll take it all. Start packing. Medicines, surgical tools, whatever you got that's worth something." They spread through the clinic like locusts. Alara watched them rifling through her carefully organized cabinets, her instruments, the supplies she'd worked so hard to acquire. Rage built in her chest, hot and consuming. "The morphine's in that locked cabinet," she said, pointing. "Key's in the desk drawer." While one of the men went for the key, Alara edged toward the surgical tray she'd left out earlier, her fingers closed around a scalpel. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The man found the key, opened the cabinet. "Jackpot. Must be 20 bottles here." "Take them and go," Alara said. "You've got what you wanted." "Not quite." The leader turned to her with a look that made her skin crawl. "Can't have you running to tell folks about this. Need to make sure you stay quiet for a while." We had a deal. Yeah, well, I lied. He stepped closer. Nothing personal, sweetheart. Just business. Alara raised the scalpel. Stay back. He laughed. What are you going to do with that? You're a doctor. You save lives. You don't take them. Try me, Alara said, her voice deadly calm. I've had a very long day. I'm tired. I'm angry. And you just threatened a child I care about. I will absolutely cut you if you come closer. Something in her eyes must have convinced him she meant it. He hesitated. That's when the door crashed open and Rourke filled the doorway, rifle in hand. Step away from her, he said quietly. Right now. The three men spun around. The leader started to raise his gun, but Rourke's rifle crack echoed through the clinic. The shot went into the ceiling, raining down splinters, but the message was clear. Next one goes through your chest, Rourke said. Drop the weapons. They dropped them. Behind Rourke, Tommy appeared with his own rifle, smaller, but held with the same steady confidence as his father's. Alara, get their guns, Rourke ordered, his eyes never leaving the thieves. Alara gathered the weapons with hands that had started shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. How did you know? Tommy heard horses. Too many for just you coming back. We came to check. Rourke shifted his weight, favoring his good leg but standing firm. Tie them up. We'll hold them until the sheriff gets here from Fort Collins. They bound the three men with rope from the barn. Rourke kept them covered while Alara and Tommy worked. By the time they finished, Sarah had appeared from the main house where she'd been having coffee with Martha, and several ranch hands had ridden in from the north pasture, attracted by the gunshot. Someone ride to Fort Collins, Rourke said. Get the sheriff. Tell him we've got 3 men attempting armed robbery. After the thieves were secured in the barn under guard, Alara finally allowed herself to collapse into a chair in the clinic. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving her hollow and shaking. Rourke appeared beside her, moving carefully on his healing leg, and pressed a glass of whiskey into her hand. Drink. She drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it helped. You scared 10 years off my life, Rourke said quietly. When I saw them in here with you, saw that one getting close, I had a scalpel. Against 3 armed men. That's not a fair fight. Fair fights are overrated. Alara set down the glass. They threatened Tommy, said they'd take him. I would have used that scalpel. I know you would have. Rourke knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to eye level despite the obvious pain it caused his leg. You protect what's yours. It's who you are. Tommy's not mine to protect. Isn't he? Rourke's hand covered hers. He thinks you are. I think you are. The only person who doesn't seem to know it is you. Alara looked at their joined hands, rough and smooth, scarred and steady. Caleb, I'm not good at this, he interrupted. This talking about feelings nonsense. Sarah always said I had the emotional range of a fence post, but I know what I see, what I feel. He paused, gathering words. You came into our lives when we needed you most. Saved Tommy, saved me. Built something here that matters. And somewhere along the way, you became part of us. Part of this family we're building from broken pieces. I'm not trying to replace your wife. I know, you keep saying that. But maybe it's time to stop thinking about replacements and start thinking about what comes next. Rourke's grip tightened. Sarah's gone. I loved her with everything I had. But she's gone, and I'm still here. And Tommy's still here. And you're here. And maybe that means something. What are you asking me? I'm asking if you want to stay. Not as the doctor who rents the clinic space. Not as the woman who saved my life out of professional obligation. As someone who belongs here. With us. He took a breath. As my partner. In the ranch. In raising Tommy. In building whatever this thing between us is becoming. Alara's heart was hammering against her ribs. That's not a small ask. No, it's not. And I know you've spent your whole life fighting to be taken seriously as a doctor, fighting for respect, for recognition. I can't promise this town will ever fully accept you the way Boston might have. Can't promise it'll be easy. Rourke's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. But I can promise that I see you. All of you. The brilliant doctor and the stubborn woman and the person who refuses to give up even when she probably should. And I want all of it, all of you, if you'll have us. In the silence that followed, Alara could hear the wind outside, the crackle of the stove, the distant sound of voices from the barn where the ranch hands were guarding the thieves. She thought about the life she'd left behind in Boston, the hospital that hadn't wanted her, the colleagues who doubted her, the society that had made it clear a woman doctor was an aberration to be tolerated at best. Then she thought about what she'd built here. The clinic that was hers, the patients who trusted her, the community that had slowly, grudgingly, learned to respect her skill regardless of her sex. Tommy's hero worship, Martha's friendship, the feeling of coming home after a long day to a place where she belonged, and Caleb. Stubborn, proud, broken and healing Caleb, who'd learned to trust her with his life and his son and now his heart. "Yes," she said simply. Rourke's face transformed. The hard lines softened and something like joy broke through the usual stoicism. "Yes? Yes, I'll stay. I'll be your partner. I'll help raise Tommy. I'll build this life with you." Alara squeezed his hand. "But I'm keeping the clinic. My practice is mine. That doesn't change." "Wouldn't expect it to." Rourke stood, pulling her up with him. "You're a doctor first, I know that. I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm asking you to add us to it." "Then we have a deal." They stood there in the lamplight, hands joined, and Alara felt something settle in her chest. A rightness she hadn't known she was missing. The next few weeks brought changes, some subtle, some not. Alara moved her personal belongings from the clinic's back room to the main house. Not to Rourke's room, they weren't there yet, both still navigating the careful dance of grief and new feelings, but to the room that had once been a sewing space. It had a window facing the mountains and enough space for her books and the few personal items she'd brought from Boston. Tommy was delighted. He took to calling her Doc instead of Dr. Quinn, which somehow felt more personal, more familial. He started leaving wildflowers on her breakfast plate, picked from the meadow behind the barn. Started asking her opinion on things that had nothing to do with medicine, what horse he should train for his own, whether his essay for the traveling teacher was any good, if she thought his mother would have been proud of him. She would have been incredibly proud, Alara told him the last time he asked. "You're brave and smart and kind. Any mother would be proud of that." "Do you think she'd be okay with you being here? With Dad being happy again?" Alara considered the question seriously. "I think if she loved your father and you as much as I've heard she did, she'd want you both to be happy, even if that happiness looks different than what she imagined." Tommy nodded, satisfied. "That's what I thought too." The clinic continued to thrive. Word had spread about the attempted robbery and how Alara had stood her ground. If anything, it had increased respect for her, the woman doctor who wouldn't be intimidated, who protected what was hers. Patients came from farther away now, sometimes traveling for days to see her. She hired another assistant, a young man with an interest in medicine who wanted to learn. Started teaching him the basics: anatomy, sterilization techniques, how to take a proper patient history. It reminded her of her own training, the excitement of learning something that could save lives. Mrs. Sykes recovered fully from her surgery. 6 months later, there was no sign of cancer returning. She became one of Alara's strongest advocates in town, organizing the other women to support the clinic, to spread word about available treatments, to counter any remaining skepticism about a woman practicing medicine. Rourke's leg healed as well as it was going to. He'd always walk with a limp, always have days when the pain was bad enough to make him short-tempered. But he could work, could ride, could do all the things that made him who he was, and he'd learned to ask for help when he needed it, which Alara counted as a bigger victory than the physical healing. One evening in late summer, after the last patient had left and the clinic was quiet, Rourke found Alara in the supply room doing inventory. "You ever stop working?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Says the man who was up before dawn mending fence?" "That's different. That's ranch work. And this is doctor work. We all have our callings." Alara marked something in her ledger. "Did you need something?" "Yeah, you, at dinner, which was ready an hour ago." Rourke moved closer. "Tommy and Martha are waiting. I just need to finish. It'll keep." He took the ledger from her hands and set it aside. "The work will always be there, but dinner's getting cold and Tommy wants to show you something he made in his woodworking class." Alara allowed herself to be led to the main house. Inside, the table was set with Martha's good dishes. Candles flickered in the center. Tommy sat at his usual spot, practically vibrating with excitement. "Finally," he exclaimed when they entered. "I thought you'd never come." "Sorry, kiddo, lost track of time." Alara took her seat, the one that had become hers over the months, between Tommy and Caleb. Dinner was lively. Tommy talked non-stop about his woodworking project, a small box he'd made for Alara's medical instruments, complete with dividers and a fitted lid. It was beautiful work for a boy his age, and Alara told him so. "Dad helped with the joints," Tommy admitted, "but I did all the sanding and the finish myself." "It's perfect, thank you." Alara meant it. After dinner, after Tommy had gone to bed and Martha had retired to her cottage, Alara and Rourke sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. The air was warm, carrying the scent of hay and summer flowers. "You happy?" Rourke asked quietly. Alara thought about the question. Happy seemed too simple a word for what she felt. Content, maybe. Fulfilled. Like all the pieces of her life that had never quite fit together in Boston had finally found their proper places. "Yes," she said. "I think I am." "Good." Rourke was quiet for a moment, then, "I've been thinking about the future, about making this official." "Official? The partnership. Us." He turned to face her. "I want to marry you, Alara. Want to make this legal, make you Tommy's stepmother in the eyes of the law. Make it clear to everyone that you're not just the doctor who lives here. Your family." Alara's breath caught. "Caleb, I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out. But I also know what I want. And I want you. Every stubborn, brilliant, impossible part of you." He pulled something from his pocket, a ring, simple and gold. "This was Sarah's. Her mother's before that. Tommy and I talked about it. We both want you to have it, if you'll take it." Alara looked at the ring, gleaming in the starlight. The weight of what he was offering settled over her. Not just marriage, but legacy. Becoming part of a family that had existed before her, that would continue after. Taking on the role of mother to a boy who'd already lost one. Binding herself to a man who still carried the ghost of his first love. It should have been terrifying. It should have felt like too much, too fast, too complicated. Instead, it felt right. "Tommy knows about this?" she asked. "It was his idea, actually. Said if I didn't hurry up and ask you proper, someone else might." Rourke smiled slightly. "Kid's got a point. I'm not exactly fighting off suitors. Maybe not here, but word's spreading about the brilliant woman doctor in Ashford Bend. Eventually someone's going to offer you a position somewhere bigger, somewhere better, and I'd like to have a claim on you before that happens. I don't need a bigger practice. I have what I want here. Is that a yes?" Alara took the ring, feeling the weight of it in her palm. "It's a yes, but I have conditions." "Of course you do." Rourke's eyes crinkled with amusement. "I keep practicing medicine. The clinic stays mine. I make my own decisions about patients and treatments." "Agreed." "I'm not giving up my name professionally. Patients know me as Dr. Quinn. That doesn't change. Wouldn't dream of asking you to. And Tommy, I'll be a stepmother, but I won't try to replace Sarah. He should remember her, talk about her. I'll never ask him to forget." "Alara," Rourke's voice was gentle. "I know you're not replacing Sarah. You're not supposed to be Sarah. You're supposed to be you. That's all we want." She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. They married in the fall when the aspens turned gold and the air carried the promise of winter. The ceremony was simple, held in the church-turned grain storage that now served as the community center. The preacher who'd given those fire and brimstone sermons about faith performed the service. Most of the town attended. Alara wore a simple dress Martha had helped her make, cream-colored with practical sleeves that wouldn't get in the way of her work. Tommy stood beside his father as best man, looking proud enough to burst. Sarah served as Alara's attendant, and even Sykes showed up, his wife on his arm, both looking genuinely happy for them. The vows were traditional, but when Rourke said, "in sickness and in health," he looked at Alara with such meaning that several people in the audience laughed. When she promised to love and honor, she added under her breath, but reserve the right to argue when you're being stubborn, which made Rourke grin. The celebration afterward was exactly what Ashford Bend was: simple, genuine, full of food and laughter, and people who'd learned to accept that sometimes the best things came in unexpected packages. Someone had brought a fiddle. Dancing started in the street. Alara, who'd never learned to dance properly, let Rourke lead her in clumsy circles while Tommy cheered them on. "Not exactly a Boston wedding," Rourke said as they spun. "Better," Alara replied. "Much better." Life settled into a rhythm after that. The clinic grew. Alara took on more complex cases, her reputation spreading beyond the immediate territory. Other doctors began referring patients to her, the difficult ones, the ones who required surgical skill beyond what most frontier physicians possessed. She performed procedures that would have been impossible a year ago, built a small surgical suite that rivaled some hospital facilities. The Territorial Commission finally approved funding for a regional hospital. They asked Alara to head it. She accepted, with the condition that she maintain her private practice as well. The hospital would be in Fort Collins, a 4-day journey, but she could travel there monthly to perform major surgeries and train staff. Tommy grew. He started helping in the clinic, showing an aptitude for medicine that reminded Alara of herself at his age. When he asked if she'd teach him properly, not just the basics, but real medical knowledge, she agreed. Started training him the way she'd been trained, with textbooks and hands-on practice, and the understanding that medicine was both art and science. "You could go to medical school," she told him one day when he was 15, watching him suture a practice wound with steady hands. "Really study. Become a doctor yourself." Would they let me? Being trained by a woman? "They let me in eventually. They'll let you in if you're good enough, and you're already good." Alara checked his stitches, neat even, properly spaced. "Better than good." "Then yeah, I want to. Want to be like you. Be like yourself, but a doctor version." Tommy grinned. "A doctor version of myself who learned from the best." Rourke's leg never fully recovered. He walked with a pronounced limp, used a cane on bad days, and had to accept that some aspects of ranch work were beyond him now. But he adapted, focused on breeding horses instead of cattle drives, built up a reputation for quality stock that brought buyers from 3 territories over, made the ranch profitable in ways it had never been before. And he learned slowly to accept help. From Alara when the pain was bad, from Tommy when heavy work needed doing, from the ranch hands who respected him enough to treat his limitations as just another challenge to work around. 5 years after Alara first arrived in Ashford Bend, she stood in the clinic, now expanded to include 4 examination rooms, a proper surgical suite, and living quarters for her assistant, and looked around at what she'd built. The cabinets were full of supplies. The instruments were state-of-the-art, ordered from Boston and San Francisco. Patient records filled an entire wall, each one a life she'd touched, helped, sometimes saved. Tommy was in medical school now, studying in Chicago. He wrote weekly, describing his classes, his dissections, the professors who were impressed by his training. In his last letter, he'd mentioned a girl, a fellow student, sharp and determined. Alara had smiled reading it, recognizing the tone of someone falling in love. Rourke appeared in the doorway, moving carefully but steadily. "Ready to go?" They were expected at the new hospital in Fort Collins for its official opening. Alara was scheduled to perform the first surgery, a demonstration of modern surgical techniques for the assembled staff. "Ready?" she said, closing her medical bag. The ride to Fort Collins took 3 days. They traveled by wagon now, more comfortable than horseback for Rourke's leg. Stopped at homesteads along the way where Alara saw patients, building connections that stretched across the entire territory. The hospital was impressive: 2 stories, modern construction, equipped with the latest medical equipment. Alara's name was on the dedication plaque: Dr. Alara Quinn, Chief of Surgery. She traced the letters with her finger, still not quite believing it was real. "You earned it," Rourke said quietly. "Every bit of it." The surgery she performed was a success. A complicated abdominal procedure, done in front of an audience of physicians who watched with varying degrees of skepticism and awe. When she finished, when the patient was stable and the outcome clear, the applause was genuine. Afterward, at the reception, doctors who'd once dismissed her sought her out, asked questions, requested consultations, treated her like a colleague instead of an aberration. How does it feel? Rourke asked as they stood on the hospital balcony, watching the sun set over the mountains. Surreal. A little overwhelming. Alara leaned against him. But good. It feels good. You going to take the position full time? They offered it to you. I saw the letter. They had. Chief of surgery, permanent position, substantial salary. It would mean moving to Fort Collins, leaving the ranch, leaving Ashford Bend. No, Alara said. I'm not. You sure this is everything you worked for? Not everything, not anymore. She turned to face him. I have a clinic in Ashford Bend that serves people who need me. I have a husband who's built a life there. I have a stepson who writes me letters about medicine and girls and asks when he can come home for visits. That's not something I'm willing to give up for a title. They might not offer it again. Then they don't, Alara shrugged. I'll consult. Travel here monthly like we planned, perform the surgeries that need my specific skills, but my home is there, with you. That's not changing. Rourke pulled her close. Have I mentioned you're the most stubborn woman I've ever met? Frequently. Usually right before you do something equally stubborn. Fair point. They stood together as the light faded, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something that defied every expectation. The woman doctor who'd refused to give up. The rancher who'd learned to trust despite his pride. The boy they both loved, growing into a man who would carry forward everything they'd taught him. 20 years later, Alara sat in her clinic, now run by a younger doctor she'd trained, a woman from Denver who'd sought her out specifically because of her reputation, and sorted through old patient files. Her hands were gnarled with arthritis now, less steady than they'd been, but her mind was sharp. Tommy had graduated medical school at the top of his class, married that sharp girl from his letters. They'd opened a practice together in Denver, specializing in surgery. He wrote weeklies still, now including stories about his own children, two girls who apparently had inherited the family's stubbornness. Rourke walked with two canes now, his injured leg having given him trouble for decades. But he still ran the ranch, still bred the finest horses in 3 territories, still argued with Alara about when he should rest and when she should stop seeing patients. You're supposed to be retired, he said, finding her in the clinic late one evening. I am retired. I'm just organizing files. You saw 4 patients today, Sarah told me. They needed help. What was I supposed to do, turn them away? Yes, that's what retired means. But Rourke's voice held no real heat. He knew better than to expect her to fully stop, just like she knew better than to expect him to fully slow down. They'd learned to accommodate each other's stubborn streaks, to work around limitations, to build a life that honored both their needs. It hadn't always been smooth. They'd fought about patient care, about money, about how to handle Tommy when he was being difficult. But they'd never stopped respecting each other, never stopped seeing each other as equals. The town had changed. Ashford Bend was bigger now, more established. There was a proper school, several stores, even a hotel for travelers. The church had been rebuilt, separated from the grain storage. And there was a hospital, small but real, that bore a plaque dedicating it to Dr. Alara Quinn Rourke, who'd brought modern medicine to the frontier. Alara didn't think of herself as a pioneer. She'd just been a woman trying to practice medicine in a place that needed it. But looking back, she could see the path she'd carved. The women doctors who'd followed in her wake, no longer having to fight quite as hard for acceptance. The patients who'd lived because she'd refused to accept that distance, or gender, or lack of resources were insurmountable obstacles. The community that had learned to value skill over tradition. Come home, Rourke said gently. It's late. The files will keep. Alara looked at him, this man who'd started as her greatest skeptic and become her strongest ally. Gray-haired now, bent with age and old injuries, but still solid. Still here. Home, she said, standing. Yes, let's go home. They walked together through the darkness, moving slowly, supporting each other when the ground was uneven. The ranch house glowed with lamplight. Inside, Sarah had left dinner warming on the stove. Tomorrow there would be patients to see, work to do, the endless demands of lives built through sheer determination. But tonight, there was just this. 2 people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built something lasting from stubbornness and skill and the refusal to accept that the world's limitations had to be their own. Alara looked up at the stars, the same ones she'd seen that first night in Ashford Bend when she'd stepped off the stagecoach into uncertainty and hostility. She'd been terrified then, though she'd never have admitted it, terrified that she'd made a mistake coming here, that she'd fail, that all her training and determination wouldn't be enough against the frontier's brutal realities. She hadn't failed. She'd succeeded in ways she couldn't have imagined, not just as a doctor, but as a person. She'd found family where she expected only patience, found love where she expected only work, found home in a place that had initially wanted nothing to do with her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Rourke looked at her. "For what?" "For trusting me when you had every reason not to, for letting me save Tommy, for letting me save you, for building this life with me. Alara, you're the one who saved us. All of us." "No. We saved each other. That's how it works." She squeezed his hand. "That's how it's always worked." They went inside together, closing the door on the cold and the dark, stepping into warmth and light, and the life they'd made from impossible choices and stubborn hope. Outside, the frontier stretched on, harsh and beautiful and full of challenges. But inside, there was peace, the kind that came from knowing you'd fought for something that mattered and won. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but won nonetheless. And that, Alara thought as she settled into her chair by the fire, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.